You're listening to the Rawha, Daily Guidance for Seekers with Shaykh Faraz Rabbani, who will be covering Imam Yusuf al-Nabahani's beautiful collection of 40 sets of 40 Hadith of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, as well as Imam Zarnuji's guidance for seekers of knowledge regarding the ways of seeking knowledge, Ta'lim al-Muta'allim, Turuq al-Ta'allum.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala Sayyidina wa Nabina Muhammad dhil qadr al-azim wa ala alihi wa ashabihi wa tabi'een lahum bi ihsanin wa hudan ila yawm ad-din. In our Daily Rawha, we are going to be looking today at some of the advice for seekers of Islamic knowledge, which we've been looking at from Ta'lim al-Muta'allim, instructing the student on the ways of learning, by Imam Zarnuji. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon him. So we reached we have reached the chapter on having concern for others and of being of sincere concern of sincere counsel to others. And we looked at some of the poetry about not responding badly to what other people do. Right? And that it's sufficient for the bad that other people do, the fact that they are engaged in it. Right? So the adab, so this shafaqa, right? The shafaqa and nasiha, the concern, the gentle care and sincere concern of the student has several aspects. The ulama say this has to do, one, with their peers. Right? With their peers. Their peers being other students of knowledge. Because you have to interact with them. What's the basis of interacting with them? Is shafaqa and nasiha. The second is in their circles of relation, right? With family, with neighbor, with others. The third has to do with their teachers as well. This applies. Right? Even though the meaning that is more manifest is ta'zeem and adab, respect and proper manners, but there's an aspect of caring, right? Of concern and caring that's very important. The fourth is with everyone else, right? With everyone else. Because as the student of knowledge is learning to become an inheritor of the Prophet ﷺ, right? So these are the essential qualities: shafaqa and nasiha, caring and sincere concern. These are essential prophetic qualities, right? Required to be able to call other people and to be accepted by them, so that one is able to benefit them, right? So that's a responsibility. Right? That's a responsibility. So this is part of the training. So even though a student of knowledge may not necessarily be actively interacting outside those closer circles, right? Seeking of knowledge is a type of isolation, right? You're not necessarily out there at every rally and demonstration, and you're not, engaged actively in dealing with a lot of external people. But even in one's own circles, one has to exaggerate these two qualities without getting distracted from one's purpose. As Shaykh Hassan put it, that if the student of knowledge has taken on a noble task, يتحمل مسؤولية شريفة. And he's taken on a noble responsibility. ولا تليق بها إلا الأخلاق الشريفة, for which only noble traits of character are befitting. Right? Right? Like one can, you know, ولا تصح لطالب العلم أخلاق أهل السوق. Right? And it doesn't befit the seeker of knowledge to have the akhlaq, the character of the people of the marketplace. Okay? Then what do? In your free time, you go to the mall, you hang out at the cafe, and you are just, looking out for when the new Netflix series comes out, and you're talking about what everyone else is talking about. That's not from the akhlaq of the student of knowledge, right? Rather, the predominant qualities are these two, right? And we looked at why else they need them. And particularly because the student of knowledge is a bit of a stranger, right, in their pursuit, right? So people may think they're a bit weird in family, in one's circles. So that's why one has to have shafaqah and nasiha towards them. And also there's a possibility amongst other seekers to have envy, right? Because where does envy arise? Imam al-Ghazali said it's very easy to have goodwill towards complete strangers, right? If you hear about there's young female student in Malaysia who recites the Quran beautifully, say mashallah, may Allah bless her, whatever. But if you find out that the person you're studying with is doing better than you in one of the subjects, you're not going to say mashallah. Like the natural tendency of the human being is towards feeling threatened. You don't feel threatened by some person in Malaysia or some young student of fiqh in Nigeria has memorized whatever, like mashallah. But if the person you're studying with is ahead of you, that's when these things can arise, and you have to hold yourself to these two qualities. وقيل من أراد أن يرغم أنف عدوه فليكرر هذا الشعر وأنشد. So the lines before, he said that if you want your enemies to feel bad, repeat that it's bad enough what you're stuck with. Then he says وأنشدت إذا شئت أن تلقى عدوك راغما وتقتله غما وتحرقه هما فرم للعلا وازدد من العلم إنه من ازداد علما زاد حاسده غما. Right? He said it has been related that if you wish for your enemy to be saddened and for you to kill them in worry and to burn them in woe, then direct yourselves to higher matters and focus on increasing in knowledge. For whoever increases in knowledge, those envious of them increase in sorrow. There's people who will be envious, etc. Like, of course, this is not literally, because it's not saying wish ill for those envious of you, but direct yourself to what's of benefit for you, right? And leave them to their envy, right? And that's enough attack, right? Rather, you want good for them and good for you, but their own, let them, leave them to their plots. Like, don't busy yourself responding to them, right? Basically, right? Focus on, the higher matters, right? Rather, the sunnah is respond in the way that is better. And part of the way that is better is that if what you are engages in better than argument with them, then engage in what you're doing, rather than arguing with them. Because the truth is not dependent on what people say. Right? What's true is in itself true. Right? Like someone said, prove that the Hanafi scholars allowed X, Y, Z. I don't have to prove it. Like they said it. You either accept my transmission or you don't. Right? Now, if someone's seeking guidance, etc., then yes. But someone wants to argue, right? If I don't prove it, doesn't mean that's what they don't say, right? Right? So, if it's only for the sake of argument, you just move on. You move on, right? And the fact that they're at enmity or envious or whatever, just that state, if you can't help them in any way, right, the least is let them be. وعليك أن تشتغل بمصالح نفسك لا بقهر عدوك. And it's incumbent upon you to busy yourself with the best interests of your own self, right? As a seeker of knowledge, because what your best interest is in seeking knowledge, to be able to benefit yourself, and through that, to be ready to be able to benefit others. Okay? Not in overcoming your enemy. Right? Because if you don't busy yourself with, it takes two to fight. So they pick a fight and you don't fight, doesn't mean you lost. And if it means you lost, what does that mean? Right? It's ego. Someone tries to argue and you say, thank you for the advice, and you move on. It's harder on your nafs. Right? It's harder on your nafs. It's not satisfying for the nafs. But if you think about it, did they really want to listen? No. Right? And here the golden principle mentioned by Ibn Ata'illah, that if you're unsure about إِذَا الْتَبَسَ عَلَيْكَ أَمْرًا, if you're not sure about one of two matters, فَانْظُرْ أَيَّهُمَا أَشَدُّ عَلَى النَّفْسِ. If you're confused about two matters, meaning two choices, then look, which one is harder on your ego, right? On your nafs. وَاتْبَعْهُ, and follow that way. فَإِنَّهُ لَا يَثْقُلُ عَلَيْهَا شَيْءٌ إِلَّا وَكَانَ حَقًّا. Because nothing weighs on the ego except that it's truth. Because what does the ego want? The ego wants inflation. Right? The ego wants recognition. So some of the time someone picks an argument. Right? So for example, someone wants to argue about moon sighting. Now, it's more satisfying, you can prove it. We should go with calculation and local and blah, 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 blah. So, you prove all of that, but what have you benefited, right? So, in that kind of case, right, if the person's willing to listen, this falls under nasiha, right? You convey it in, if it'll be nasiha, then, you can say it'll be a benefit, convey it. But if it's merely for the satisfaction of your ego, let me prove it, then you don't, right? Then you don't. With someone at enmity to you. Also, sometimes you may know something as a seeker of knowledge, and having shafaqah, caring concern for yourself, is you have to keep in mind that just because you know something, you don't have to convey it. Sometimes the safer thing is to point them to the benefit. Right? And that's sort of the thing about, give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day. Show them where the fish are and he'll get them forever. Right? So sometimes you know the answer, but you point them that, there's this good website where, I think there's an answer about that. And you share that with them. So now, not only have you given them one answer, but shown them where you can find a reliable answer. Right? Or someone, let's say during RIS, they're visiting from the Bay Area. Right? And you find out, they're down the road from Imam Tahir's masjid, for example. Right? So you help them connect with a scholar in their community or in their area. Say, why don't you ask them? So you've helped them gain a source of benefit. But also, so you've helped them. But which choice is less satisfying for the ego? Right? The second one, right? So it's not that you don't hold back from benefit, but you choose the way of conveying the benefit that is in your best interest, right? Right? And they say, نَفْسُكَ حَيَّ مَا دُمْتَ حَيًّا. Right? Your nafs, your ego, is a snake. Is a hayya, مَا دُمْتَ حَيًّا, as long as you're alive. Right? It's a play on words. Your ego is a snake as long as you're alive. Okay? فإذا قمت بمصالح نفسك تضعن ذلك قهر عدوك. Okay? And if you fulfilled your interests, the interests of your own self, short-term and long-term, then that is far better than overcoming your enemy right now, right? And that also bequeaths negative traits of wishing ill for another, putting another down. وَإِيَّاكَ وَالْمُعَادَاةِ, and beware of becoming at enmity with another. فَإِنَّهَا تَفْضَحُكَ, because it will shame you. وَتُضَيِّعُ أَوْقَاتَكَ, and it'll waste your time. Because if you refute them, they'll want to refute you. And then you'll feel compelled to refute them back. And back and forth, right? So in those things, someone says, I don't believe in following a madhab. Now you don't say, I don't, okay, you can say whatever, right? But if you think they may listen, say, and sometimes you don't tell them right away. Say, you're mentioning about madhabs, there's this, good article, good talk, whatever, you may want to consider listening to that. Or sometimes there's someone that they do trust. And sometimes people don't piece together all the dots. You say, oh, we love Shaykh Hamza. And they say, we don't believe in following madhab. Shaykh Hamza has talked about madhabs. He has an article about the I think he translates something about Marabat al-Hajj, about the obligation following one of the 4 schools, whatever. So you point them to a benefit from a source that they may accept. Okay? I was once somewhere in Connecticut, and it's the most traumatic 3 days of my life. And the place I was staying, the couple was divorced at least 40 times, if not more. But they thought if you're upset with each other, it doesn't count. Like, when did people in love divorce each other, right? It would be a pretty memorable story, right? Honey, I love you, but I gotta let you go. So the wife, I told her to ask Imam Zayd. The brother, given his background, I said, Shaykh Yasir Qadi? I know about him. He said, I know someone who knows him well. I said, well, contact him. And within an hour, both Imam Zayd and Shaykh Yasir, Allah preserve both called. Said, can you believe? Like, how did they think they're not divorced? Right? Especially with Imam Zayd to be shocked at an incident, but and I fulfill my responsibility when it comes to commanding the good and forbidding the wrong. And nasiha, Abu Talib al-Makki mentioned that if you point someone to guidance, it's like you have guided them. Right? And beware of being at enmity, because it wastes your time, because it shames you and it wastes your time. Because you attack them, then they'll want to put you down. وَعَلَيْكَ بِالتَّحَمُّلِ, and hold fast to bearing the hurt of others. لَا سِيَّمَا مِنَ السُّفَهَاءِ, particularly from fools. Right? And a fool is anyone whose actions don't return to established principles. Right? So a learned person may be acting in a foolish way. Someone is maybe a complete fool, but someone may be acting in a foolish way, even though they're a learned person. But there too, you don't engage in that folly. قال عيسى بن مريم صلوات الله Salawatullahi ala nabiyyina wa alayhi. So Jesus, the son of Mary, said, may Allah's blessings be upon our Prophet and upon him. احتملوا من السفيه واحدة تربح عشرة. Said, bear from fools even once, and you will profit tenfold. Okay? And from that is that it's hard for the ego. It deflates the ego. This is why they say, الصادق لا ينتصر لنفسه. The person who's true does not defend themselves. Right? Meaning when there's no clear religious or worldly interest in doing so. Okay? There may be a religious interest or a worldly interest in doing so. Okay? Which is why they mentioned the story of Abu Hanifa, that once he was traveling in a caravan and there was a fool, a safih, or the whole journey he was joking around with Abu Hanifa and making sarcastic and mocking jokes and so on. And Abu Hanifa was just chilled. When he reached the city limits, he said, listen, the whole trip I've been patient with you. He says, but in the city they know me as Abu Hanifa Nu'man. Right? And they trust me for their deen. If you say a single word against me, I'm going to report you to the police. Right? Because when it was just about him, he couldn't care. Right? But there was a clear, greater interest in it. Right? Right? So sometimes, there is a, but if it's just about the ego, right, you let it go. وَأُنْشِدْتُ لِبَعْضِهِمْ, he said, and I've heard some lines of poetry from some of them. بلوت الناس قرنا بعد قرن فلم أرى غير ختال وقالي ولم أرى في الخطوب أشد وقعا وأصعب من معاداة الرجال. Says, I have dealt with the troubles of people. Qarn here means for ages after ages, meaning for a long, long time. And I haven't seen anything but deception and the disliked. And I did not see of tests anything more trying or more difficult than the enmity of people. Right? So one doesn't care when it has to do with oneself, but at the same time, this is why one of the important qualities is mudara. And it's a tricky, to be considerate. Right? To be considerate. And one of the most amazing counsels on how to on diplomacy, right, which is an important art. It's a social art. It's not a political art, right? And in classical usage, when they talk about siyasa, it's siyasatun nas, right? And Shaykh Hassan quoted Ibn Sina who wrote a book on diplomacy, right? It's the art and skill of knowing how to deal with people in a manner that fulfills one's purpose. Right? And then the sunnah of it is mudara, is to be considerate. Right? And that's from wisdom. And Abu Hanifa gave this amazing counsel to, and many copies of Ta'lim al-Muta'allim, this counsel is included at the end of Ta'lim al-Muta'allim. It's Abu Hanifa's counsel to his student, Yusuf as-Samti, and a lot of it has to do with how to deal with people, with consideration. But it's ultimately goes back to be having shafaqa towards them and nasiha. And he continues, وَذُقْتُ مَرَارَةَ الْأَشْيَاءِ طُرًّا فَمَا شَيْءٌ أَمَرُّ مِنَ السُّؤَالِ. He says, and I have tasted the bitterness of many things repeatedly, but there is nothing more bitter than begging. There's nothing more bitter than begging. And one of the things a student of knowledge, one of the important qualities of a student of knowledge is ta'affuf, right? Is to have dignified restraint. Which is why, for example, Shaykh Hassan al-Hindi and the mashayikh in general are very careful about this, but they instill it in students as well, that the student should not be a taker, in the sense that, for example, in a place like Damascus, people have a lot of goodwill, but the common person is unrefined. Right? The common person is unrefined. They have a lot of goodwill, but they'll also have tendency to thinking ill and gossip and slander and all these, because unless someone's refined, you shouldn't be surprised when negative traits get manifest. So they'll invite you over for food, send food over regularly, anytime they're inviting people over. Of course, we don't do any of those things here. We don't have those social norms. But they do all this stuff, but then what happens? They'll speak ill of you. Look at her, she's a freeloader. Whenever there's a meal, there he is. So he said that one needs to have dignified restraint in these matters, right? Because it's also a type of begging. It's as if you're there because you want a free meal. So a lot of mashayikh, what they do, if they're invited to meals and stuff, they would eat before going. So they went with the intention of that even if you hardly have any food, right? Or eat at least something before, so you eat adnal haja, you eat the least, but so it cannot be said that, oh, look at the shaykh, he's, because when they look critically, one plate looks like three. Look at the shaykh, he's always eating. You go, you greet, whatever, but, one should not be, and this is, which is why, the prophets did not accept, they accepted gifts, they did not accept charity, right? And that's, because you are training to become someone who's an inheritor of the Prophet, and that dignity is very important. And it's from siyanatul ilm, from guarding knowledge, is to guard oneself from the ill will of people, right? And he says and he'll talk more about that when he talks about the how a student of knowledge should be. He says, وَإِيَّاكَ أَن تَظُنَّ شَرًّا بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ. He said, beware of thinking ill of the believers. فَإِنَّهُ مَنْشَأُ الْعَدَاوَةِ. Because it is the root of enmity. وَلَا يَحِلُّ ذَلِكَ. And that is not permitted. Religiously, it's impermissible. لِقَوْلِهِ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ ظُنُّوا بِالْمُؤْمِنِينَ خَيْرًا. Because the Prophet ﷺ commanded, think well of believers. Right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ بَعْضَ الظَّنِّ إِثْمٍ. Some ill opinion is sinful. And the ulama say the some here, ba'd, refers to much of. That most ill opinion is sinful. Right? Because what is commanded, and one of the ulama explained it, that it is obligatory to think well of another human being. And that is like your operational certainty, your yaqeenul asli. وَالْيَقِينُ الْأَصْلِ لَا يَزُولُ بِالشَّكِّ الطَّارِئِ. And your original certainty is not lifted by doubts and possibilities that arise. وَالْيَقِينُ لَا يُتْرَكْ إِلَّا لِيَقِينٍ. Right? Certainty is only left for certainty. Right? And then, when it comes, there's some places where you may pursue a doubt, right? Out of caution, where it may be praiseworthy. Right? So, for example, you're staying at someone's house, and there seems to be some really nice thing, some really fancy cereals, but you don't know whether you have a doubt. They seem really fancy and you don't know, like, maybe they're saving it, whatever, you just had a doubt. So you just ask permission. And there, pursuing the doubt for clarity is praiseworthy. But when it comes to good opinion of people, the sunnah is as-satr. Right? Man satara musliman satarahu Allahu fi dunya wal akhirah. Whoever covers over for a believer, Allah covers over for them in this life and the next. Right? So it goes back to thinking ill of another. Right? You don't think ill because of, even when there's a reason for doubt, you don't think ill and you don't pursue that doubt, but rather you return back to the certainty. Right? Thinking ill would be sinful. Pursuing the doubt, even through legitimate means, would be leaving the sunnah. Would be leaving the sunnah. Right? Now, of course, if there's a reasonable doubt, it allows you to exercise caution, but doesn't allow you to think ill of the person. Right? So let's say, the Imad is starting a business. Right? So once in a while, you notice someone was dealing in rather strange ways. Right? And the Imad wants to do things right. He's like, now those strange ways, it arise doubts. You can't think ill of the person, but you can exercise caution. But then, this is both your thinking, but let's say someone comes to see the Imad and says, should I do business with Farid? Can you convey those doubts? No. Why? Because they're unconfirmed. They're unconfirmed and unverified. What you can do is you can point that you should just give them general nasiha that points them towards those things without being specific. Say, just as in any, you give them advice, just as in any dealing, make sure that, I don't know, but just make sure that they're good when it comes to having clarity in dealings. And you may want to check with people who've dealt with them. So you point them towards the point of caution without highlighting the caution. Right? So the rights of others in this matter are very, very particular. Right? And he says, وَإِنَّمَا يَنْشَأُ ذَلِكَ مِنْ خُبْثِ النِّيَّةِ. And thinking ill of people only arises because you have an ill intent, meaning towards them. Whereas what are you commanded to have towards them? Nasiha. وَالنُّصْحُ, the Prophet ﷺ used to take the bay'ah. وَالنُّصْحِ لِكُلِّ مُؤْمِنٍ, to have sincere concern for every believer. Right? We are commanded to have that. Right? الدين النصيحة, that's what religion is. Right? لأئمة المسلمين وعامتهم, for the leaders of the Muslims and the common person. Right? So it comes from having ill intent, having vile intent towards her, وَسُوءِ السَّرِيرَةِ, and having a bad inward. And then we'll close with the lines of Abu Tayyib al-Mutanabbi, who was a brilliant man. A lot of the ulama said that, if only he was of the spiritual path, right? Because he had some profound insights into the human condition. With things that are spiritual in meaning. Even though, at least ostensibly he was not a person of the spiritual path. But inshallah there was, may Allah have mercy on him. It says, إِذَا سَاءَ فِعْلُ الْمَرْءِ سَاءَتْ ظُنُونُهُ وَصَدَّقَ مَا يَعْتَادُهُ مِنْ تَوَهُّمِ وَعَادَ مُحِبِّيهِ بِقَوْلِ عُدَاتِهِ وَأَصْبَحَ في ليل من الشك مظلم. He said, if a person's actions become corrupt, then their opinions of others become corrupt. It becomes sayyi. Right? If a person's actions become bad, then their opinions of others become bad. Right? And they deem true what they become accustomed to of mere imagination. Right? Things that they merely imagine, they take as true. Someone just took a deep breath, but maybe because, the sister's, I don't know how many months pregnant, and her back's hurting. So he says, look, she's like, doesn't accept what I have to say. Right? She was, you take the little things to be wrong. وَعَادَ مُحِبِّيًا, was at enmity with the people who love one, taking the words of their enemies. So you accept the words of people who are enmity to you with respect to people who love you. وَأَصْبَحَ فِي لَيْلٍ مِنَ الشَّكِّ مُظْلِمٍ, and they end up at night in the darkness of doubts. Right? So this is a bad state to be in. Right? This is a very bad state to be in. So, and the next line of poetry he quotes, تَنَحَّى عَنِ الْقَبِيحِ وَلَا تُرِدْهُ, said, go away from the vile and seek it not. وَمَنْ أَوْلَيْتَهُ حَسَنًا فَزِدْهُ, and whoever you direct good towards, then increase in that. سَتُكْفَأَ مِنْ عَدُوِّكَ كُلَّ كَيْدٍ إِذْ كَادَ الْعَدُوُّ فَلَا تُكِدْهُ, and you will be granted sufficiency from your enemies, from every plot. And even if your enemy plots, don't plot against them. Right? How? Turn away from anything vile. Right? It is only when you engage in the mud of enmity that it'll affect you. Right? And one of the scholars, when I was overseas, one of the respected mashayikh was publicly attacking him on certain points for years. And he told his students that none of you should respond to anything he says, and never deal with him except with the utmost respect, and never mention him except with praise that he deserves as a learned scholar. That's 3 principles. And he himself did not answer any of the attacks for years. But then what happened, that sheikh, after many years of attacking this particular scholar, went and attacked a scholar who was very close to the government. That scholar got offended. And being close to the government, he plotted against the critical sheikh. And he stole away several of the sheikh's closest students by getting them government jobs. And he reported him to the intelligence services, that this guy may have, so he got in trouble with the intelligence agencies. And the government, that he may have political ambition. So he got called in for that. And caused all this, and wrote several ugly public attacks, and accused him of all kinds of things. And then he said, and amongst the things he does, he attacks the righteous ulama, such as Shaykh so-and-so. So a few of us, because it's actually kind of exciting to watch this from a distance. So we went to the silent sheikh and said, Sheikh, he's saying that, so should we defend him? He said, look, you can do whatever you want, as long as you don't involve me in any of this. Right? So we consulted. I said, okay. So we wrote a defense. Then no, that sheikh, while he was critical of silent sheikh, it was all based on ilmi things. We didn't mention that his students took it way beyond that, but to be fair, right? Even though the attacks were unfair and whatever, but they're ilmi. So we defended him. And we actually wrote a joint statement. We all signed to it, put it online. It's in the Arab world. So that Shaykh was so grateful. I can't believe it, and this and that. Says, for years I've been admiring how the Shaykhs never said anything, etc. And he apologized. He said, I've been rajat hisabati. I've sort of reviewed the issues, and so on. And the Shaykh, silent Shaykh, couldn't care less anyways, right? Right? And now the critical Shaykh sends students to go and study with silent Shaykh, right? And has nothing but good, even though still there's issues where he disagrees, but he doesn't talk about those disagreements anymore, right? So that's, keep away from all vileness, seek it not. And whoever you do good to, focus on increasing in that good. And this way you'll be granted sufficiency from every plot, right? And if your enemy plots, then don't plot against them. And this is the way of the Prophet ﷺ, right? They try to kill him in all kinds of ways. They try to hurt him in any way. He never responded to that with any plot against them. He only wanted the good for them. He protected himself from harm, sought nothing but good for them, and focused on the good that he could do, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Right? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "Inna kafaynaaka al-mustahzi'in." We have granted you sufficiency from all those who deride you. Okay? And Allah promised protection after protection. Anyone, and Ibn Ajiba says in his tafsir, that anyone who is sincerely striving to follow the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right, and who commits to this prophetic quality of keeping away from violence, seeking harm for no one, and focusing on doing good, seeking Allah thereby, that Allah will grant you sufficiency from your enemies. Okay? And even if they plot against you, don't plot against them. Okay? But rather, you protect yourself, of course, from harm. Be discreet. Don't be of enmity. And he continues how to deal with ignorant people. We'll close with that next class, and the summary, and then the chapter after is what are keys to benefit. Right? This is repeating something that he mentioned briefly earlier. So next class we're going to look at a closing of the section of how to actualize sincere concern for others, and then some of the keys to seeking benefit. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to realize us in it. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallama taslima.
Thank you for listening to the Rawha, Daily Guidance for Seekers with Shaykh Faraz Rabbani. Help Seekers Hub give light to millions around the world by supporting us through monthly donations by going to seekershub.org/donate. Your donations are tax deductible in the US and Canada.